Scoop B. Robinson, friend and colleague. How are you?
I'm good, but I left heavy.
Really?
I did. I left in February.
Wow. So, I've been watching your material a lot now, and you're always putting something out. So what have you been up to now?
New beginnings coming very soon. Can't say just yet. But
Uh-oh.
I will say to you that, even during that process, Scoopy Radio is still moving. But yeah, I am a free agent.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Okay. You're not going to have like a LeBron James type of press conference, are you?
No, but there are things coming down the pipeline that are
okay.
worth paying attention to. So please be on the lookout for that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, what I wanted to say was, you do amazing work. And the first thing that I wanted to touch base with you was, so I saw your interview with Gary Payton.
Okay.
And he said LeBron James by far when he talked about who's just overall better player. And it made me think, because I saw him reminiscing about Michael Jordan, the old games. How are we as media members, how are we as fans going to reminisce and look back at the players today 10 to 15 years from now because they played with the emergence of social media? Is it going to change the way we view players today?
Well, I think part of it is age. Not to be an ageist with you, I would imagine that Michael Jordan was somebody that you saw on YouTube, Classic Sports, and you heard your parents talk about him. But because you're in the loop, you've done your own research and you can make your own deductions. I think LeBron, people thrusted him as this next thing. And in between that, Kobe, while LeBron was coming in, was doing his thing. And I feel like Tim Duncan was doing his thing, but they don't give him his proper address because he's not loud, blasting hip-hop music and obnoxious. And I feel as though Steph Curry is the modern-day Tim Duncan. In the sense of, I feel like Tim Duncan took the baton from Michael. Duncan came in 97. Jordan was on his way out, I think, two years later. And then Jordan came back. And during that time, Duncan got him a couple rings. And then when Jordan left playing for the Wizards, Duncan got a couple more rings there, too. In an era where Allen Iverson, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, Shaq, and others were paid attention to. And I feel as though when you look at the era now, we're starting to do that reminiscing thing now because, number one, the Warriors had began their dominance for years. And specifically, Steph Curry left his mark in the sense of people pulling up from half court and that being okay. You saw it in the game with the Bulls. Denzel Valentine took a jumper the other day. And I remember I quote tweeted and said, hey, everybody makes mistakes. They're young. You learn. But you can't deny, and I'm paraphrasing my tweet, you can't deny Steph Curry's imprint on that game where that's okay. And somebody commented and said he's 27. I said, yeah, but he was drafted in 2016. And at the same time, the Warriors had been to a couple finals by then. I think the 2015 finals with the Warriors, many people expected for, LeBron James and the Cavs with their big three to just come in and steamroll, and that Warriors team took everybody by surprise. And you're like, okay, maybe they got lucky. Will they do it again? And I feel as though, they did it a couple more times. I think what we're seeing now is we're just talking about the reminiscing. I think 10 years from now, people are going to equate the Toronto Raptors as winning a championship in 2019. They're going to examine, and I was having this conversation with a friend the other day, they're going to examine LeBron's injury that year and Kevin Durant being hurt, Klay Thompson being hurt, and Kawhi being at the right place, right time in Toronto and helping them win a championship. And they may end up comparing that Raptors championship to those two championships that the Houston Rockets won in the 90s when Michael Jordan was retired playing baseball and/or came back and they lost in the semis to the Orlando Magic. I think as you look over the course of history, some people say the Bulls could have won 8 championships. We talk about that now. And I think that we're going to look at the Warriors and say, well, if Klay and Kevin Durant weren't hurt, would the Raptors have won that championship? If you remember, Kawhi was in San Antonio, got traded to Toronto, and right place, right time. But I feel like his impact on that Raptors team was very Jordan-like and I feel like, Pascal Siakam's contribution was very Pippen-like. The Bulls didn't have a Kyle Lowry type of player. B.J. Armstrong is not Kyle Lowry. I know B.J., I would say that to his face, but at the same time, I feel like Kawhi's impact on that Raptors team was very Jordan-like. Pascal Siakam's was very Pippen-like, and Pippen couldn't get the Bulls over the hump. They lost to the Knicks in '94, and the Knicks ended up going to the finals and losing to the Rockets. So, in answer to your question, not to bulldoze and just over talk, but I think when you look at the next 10 years, people are going to be analyzing the 2000s, the 2010s with a fine-tooth comb in the same way I think we looked at the 90s. I think right now 90s is just in because now a lot of those guys are in front office roles, TV, and more. So, yeah, I think you're going to look at that from years to come, the next 10 to 20 years, and examine that with a fine-tooth comb. And it's going to be interesting.
Right, because when I was I think the other day was 1 year anniversary since The Last Dance came out.
Mm-hmm.
We had that, and then I remember how fascinated and intrigued everyone was. Well, obviously because it was the main product that was going on during the pandemic, but also because we're like, wow, we haven't seen this footage before. It's a story. Because back then people didn't have iPhones where everything is you could just see everything all the time. It's like you can see what they present to you. So we were fascinated with seeing behind the scenes stuff. So now I'm thinking when I watched you talk with Gary Payton and him reminiscing about MJ, I'm like, man, that's so cool. I'm like, I wonder if because we have iPhones everywhere all the time, is it going to be like, oh, we've already seen that, done that because we see everything? Is it going to change the way we look back at stuff? Like our documentary is going to lose value because we already see everything you could possibly see in real time. People are streaming and going live. I didn't know if it would have that type of effect. So it's an interesting point of view.
Yeah, and I think when you talk about behind the scenes footage and stuff, I think that Snapchat and Instagram stories and Twitter fleets have kind of given everybody the BTS, the behind the scenes look. But I think that the BTS does not give the story without context, or gives the story without context.
Right.
That's why I think documentaries will still be a thing. I think that's why streaming services like Disney Plus, Netflix, Hulu, and more will still have their place where they need to be, because I feel as though everybody has smartphones, but everybody can't tell documentaries. Just like a lot of people can give their takes on things, that doesn't make them official. Because takes are barbershop talk, but without the proper interviews and without the proper, did he play or did he cover or was he related to this person? It doesn't always get everybody's opinion based upon their experience is different.
Right.
So I feel as though, yes, you have a lot of access to behind the scenes, but it's interesting. You talked about my Gary Payton interview. I had Phil Handy, Lakers assistant coach, on the Scoopy Radio podcast last spring, and Phil was an assistant coach with the Raptors when they won. He was an assistant coach with the Cavaliers. He was an assistant coach with the Lakers last year. And one of the things that he said to me was he feels as though that 2016 Cavaliers team that were down 3-1 in the finals and then ended up coming up and winning. He said to me that could have been a Last Dance documentary just based upon how they got to that point. So right. You're talking David Blatt's firing. You're talking. He didn't say this. This is me talking. David Blatt firing, Ty Lue taking over. The Kyrie LeBron dynamic, and then all the other pieces. I've spoken to people on that Cavaliers team who have shared with me just how LeBron, even though David Blatt was the coach, LeBron was really the coach, and LeBron kind of said, "Hey guys, listen to me, do this, do that." But that goes back into the LeBron's free agency, where he ended up coming back to Cleveland and helped, being from Northeast Ohio, so you're going to see more documentaries. I think even with, the Kobe, Shaq Lakers team, you're going to see more I think posthumously more documentaries just about the dynamics of their relationship. So I think that at the end of the day, basketball players have names like rock stars. They're going to always be relevant, and they're going to always find a way to monetize something with sponsors, because sponsors want to spend money on big names and get a return on their investment. And two, I think that BTS is great, but again, it doesn't tell the whole story.
Right. Now, Scoop, if I were to ask you, what's one documentary that you would want to be released, that you want to see? What would it be? Would it be the Showtime Lakers Magic Kareem, or would it be Kobe Shaq? Would it be that 2016 run with the Cavs? What's a documentary you're excited to see?
Well, I know Shaq and I knew Kobe. I talked to someone in his family via text this morning, and I think the Showtime Lakers were. I know some of those members of that team also, but that wasn't my era.
Okay.
My parents watched the Showtime Lakers. I was born during that era, but I grew up in the 90s and the 2000s, and you always remember music that you fell in love to, or you were the man to, or you remember certain things, and you remember that basketball team that you practiced in your backyard or in the park. And Shaq and Kobe definitely were that dynamic duo. And so for me, it probably would be Shaq and Kobe, but I just love basketball, so I would watch anything. I like Magic.
Right.
I've gotten to know Magic over the years, and I know Byron Scott. I've Michael Cooper. I'm cool with Sam Perkins. So I like both Lakers teams, but I grew up during the Shaq Kobe era, so probably I'd like to see that because it was my era.
Right. I think that would be fascinating because you take obviously the late great Kobe Bryant, who I've always said I think he should be the logo, just because I don't think the logo symbolizes who's the best player. Not to get off on a tangent here, but I think it symbolizes what he stands for and how many people connect with him. Like when I shot in school, middle school or high school, when I shot paper into a trash can, it was Kobe. I say Kobe, and I hold the follow through and say Kobe. So you take that type of guy, and then you take a flamboyant personality, the most dominant player we've ever seen, that force with Shaq, and then you take their rings, and you got the Phil Jackson. Like I just think it's such an incredible must-see product that I can't wait for it to finally develop, if it does develop. But I'm sure, like you said, I'm sure they're working on something along those lines. We brought up Magic Johnson, and I think that's a player who obviously we know how great he is. But I think often when you think of like the greatest players of all time, I know like Dr. J just released like his all-time team. I always want Magic to get more love. Like that guy was a champion. He was a 6'9" point guard. He was transcendent. And I think there's one player who has an opportunity to – I don't think he's going to be better than Magic Johnson, but I think when you talk greatest point guards of all time, Steph Curry's having an opportunity that very few have. And I think he has an opportunity to continue to build on his legacy. So when I heard these rumors about – I wanted to ask you, when you hear about these rumors of Steph and the Lakers, does that make sense to you? Coming from someone who, has 3 rings, first ever unanimous MVP, greatest shooter of all time. Hey, I have an opportunity to give somebody like a Magic a run for his money. Let me go to LA and build on something different. Very few players ever have an opportunity to chase all-time greatness the way Steph already has and is continuing to do. Is that something that makes sense to you? Could you see that happening?
I think Steph is in a very, when you think of Warriors, you think of Steph in a way that you don't look at Tim Hardaway, Mitch Richmond, and Chris Mullin the same way. Tim left and went to Miami. Mullin went to the Pacers. Mitch Richmond went to the Sacramento Kings and ended up winning a championship with the Lakers. You think of Tim as more of a Heat player than you do a Warriors player. And this may be a little bit before your time, but when I think of the Warriors, the early 90s, I thought of the television show Hanging with Mr. Cooper, where, Mark Curry was a guy who played for the Warriors, got hurt, and stayed in Oakland and became a school teacher. And when I look at the Warriors organization, there was a legacy before. Al Tittle, I think, was on that team. And I just think at the end of the day, though, I think when you think of Steph Curry, you think of him as a Warrior, just like you think of Michael as a Bull, you think of Kobe as a Laker. And I think while those conversations, some of my peers have put that out about Steph and particularly the Lakers, me personally, I don't see it, but that doesn't mean that it's out of the question. I mean, because you think 10 years ago, would you actually think LeBron would become a Laker?
Right
Like,
now. Yeah,
you
yeah,
think
that sounds made up.
like you think of him as a Cav, 2 times over. And the way that he came to Miami was a way that was never done in modern sports. You stayed with the team, you continue to win, and then as a result, that bore Kevin Durant joining the Warriors after being frustrated in Oklahoma and winning multiple championships. So, in answer to your question, number one, I think I gotta do some housekeeping. One, I don't think that we in a modern era totally appreciate Magic Johnson as a 6'9" point guard because not just because there were no cameras, most people weren't born yet. Like when I look at Magic Johnson, yeah, I knew who he was, and yeah, I had parents who were Laker fans and watched the Lakers. But I was young. I knew of James Worthy. I knew who he was. I knew who Byron's was and all those guys. But I didn't really get to watch Magic like that until he made his second comeback when he was a Laker, and he was basically built like LeBron, and he was guarding Dennis Rodman, and this was like 95, 96. When you go back and you look at Magic and what he did, his impact, again, we talked about my interview with Gary Payton. Gary Payton and I both agree that LeBron James is more Magic than he is Michael. That being said, in between LeBron and Magic came Penny Hardaway. Magic Johnson walked so Penny could fly. And I feel like as a result of Penny flying, commercial, LeBron is flying in a private jet. I think that even in between all of that, you had the Jamal Mashburns, you had the Jalen Roses, that point forward role, you had the Scottie Pippins. Like, there was a whole lineage of guys who were like 6'7" to 6'9" and could do things like that. And
Grant Hill
as well. And, I think that if Grant Hill had been more healthier, you would have had more LeBron, Grant Hill conversations. I actually sat down with Grant Hill a couple of years ago. We talked about that, just that whole level of that point forward. And, he does see similarities between himself and LeBron. But I want to put that out there because I hear people talk about Steph Curry and Magic and greatest point guard of all time. They're two different players. And I think we have to be careful when we do these comparison things because like Magic and LeBron, who are similar, people always do the whole Michael LeBron thing. And I think Steph Curry is his own animal because he literally is a point guard and a two guard in the same body. And I heard the comedian Chris Rock say Steph Curry is Allen Iverson with a father in the home. You can break that up however you want to, but literally Steph Curry has Allen Iverson dribbles with Reggie Miller precision, and we've never seen anything like it. Just like I think that term, like I think Steph Curry is right on time, but I think somebody like O.J. Mayo was ahead of his time as far as lead guards go. Ben Gordon was ahead of his time as far as lead guards go because they were both undersized two guards that were point guard size but did two guard things. Steph Curry is the mixture of the playmaker, the pick and roll guy, the guy that can shoot 3-point shots but can also direct the flow of a team. And so I think in the highlight era, in the social media snippet era, you got to kind of peg him as what he is. But at the same time, the Magic Johnson comparisons, I'm not ready to do that yet, only because they're not comparable in the same way.
No, that's a great point. My guy Rashad said Steph's not even a point guard. He's an HG. He created the hybrid guard. The way they play the position is just completely different to your point. What do you like? I've said Chris Paul is my MVP this year, and I've done my Wi-Fi analogy to that. He doesn't connect with everybody, but when he does, it's a stronger signal. He elevates people, kind of like what MJ did. But Steph, to me, is having like one of the most impressive runs I've seen, What do you make of Steph breaking all these records? Obviously, he breaks Kobe records. I don't know what number he's at now. At the time, he had 11 games in a row with 30-plus points. I think it went to 13. He had like 83, 89 threes in a month. What do you make of that? Because I know a lot of people are talking about the defense, and we'll get to the defense in the league right now. But what are you making of Steph Curry's run? Do you think this is – what do you take away from it?
He's doing his thing. I think he is a huge blip on what is going on in the NBA for a team that wasn't really expected to potentially make a run in the NBA playoffs. And they're flirting with working their way up to the 8th spot. And when I look at what he's done, I mean, he's doing what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to, break records. He's been in the league for a while. I don't take anything away from him. In my mind, the MVP of the league is the best player on their team, who leads their team, who gets their team to the promised land. I don't think that Steph Curry is the MVP of the league, because when you look at even like in 2004 when was at 2007, Dirk Nowitzki was the league MVP. Team was in first place, but lost to an 8th seed Golden State Warriors team.
Yeah.
He was the best player in the team. He led them. But there were some years, I don't know if it was that year, like Dwayne Wade or Kobe Bryant could have been in that conversation. You look at in the 90s where, there were years that you can you hear me?
Yep.
There were years where Michael Jordan in the 90s should have been MVP. But instead, Charles Barkley got it. David Robinson got it. Malone. So I think that Steph Curry is great. Don't get me wrong. But this season, you look at Donovan Mitchell. You look at Damian Lillard. You look at Chris Paul. You look at even, before his injury. You look at Joel Embiid. Those guys have led.
Right.
I think Donovan Mitchell has carried. Chris Paul has led. Joel Embiid has led. Paul George has led. Actually, I think he's carried. I think Kawhi has led.
Okay.
I think you look at you look in the Eastern Conference. You look at the Brooklyn Nets, who are currently at the time of this interview in first place. I think pre-injury, you look at James Harden. He's led. You look at Kyrie Irving. I think he's carried. I think you just look at these teams that are out there. There's so many players that LeBron James pre-injury was carrying, but leading too. So I think that this is a mixed bag where in years past you unanimously pick, like last season, Giannis Antetokounmpo, who I think there were other. I think LeBron was the MVP of the league last year,
right?
But Giannis got it. So, in answer to your question, no, I don't think Steph Curry is the MVP, but that doesn't take anything away from what Steph Curry has done this season.
Right. I wanted to talk to you about the MVP. So I've been kind of critical of the award. I just think it's not consistent. Sometimes it's analytical. Sometimes it's narrative driven. Like Giannis right now is having statistically just as good a year as he did last year when he won it, but he's not going to win it this year. But say Jokic wins it because of, there's numerous reasons. He's playing great basketball. Jamal Murray goes down, but also other players get injured. If Jokic wins the MVP, does this send a signal to the rest of the bigs, future bigs entering the league? The bigs can still be very valuable and impactful in the league. You just have to be evolved in the position in today's game. Does that send a message to the rest of the bigs?
I don't know if it sends a message, but I think it's an example of the fact that you can be in a smaller market team and still be recognized. I did not mention Jokic, and I should, because I think that Jokic quietly has been doing great work. And I think that for Jokic to play the way he's playing, he's done it in a way that we haven't seen a player like that since probably Arvydas Sabonis.
Yeah.
A big man that plays like a guard. And really and truly, Sabonis was playing, at the point where the NBA got Sabonis. Sabonis was like 35, 36 years old when he finally came to the NBA. Sabonis had cats on skates, man, overseas. And, I think he's a throwback to that. I think, I'm going to use another name. I don't know if this name resonates, but, you look at the old Warriors team in the 90s. Well, everybody knows Tim Hardaway as their point guard. Tom Tolbert was their point center. And, Tom Tolbert ended up having a successful TV career on the NBA on NBC. But yeah, like I see so many mixes of different guys. But Jokic is a one of a kind. And I remember sitting down with Ray Allen a couple years ago, and he talked about how he felt that the center position was making a comeback. And how, it's not going to be your dominant guys like Shaq, but, guys like Ayton, DeAndre Ayton, even guys like, Karl Anthony Towns, Joel Embiid, as well as, even Bol. They're going to make their dominance, but they're going to do it in almost like a Hakeem Olajuwon footwork sort of way. Hakeem was a center that played like a point guard, or played like a guard in general, because his footwork was so elite. Patrick Ewing, same way. Patrick Ewing and Hakeem Olajuwon both played soccer. And so when you look at their footwork, it's crazy. When you look at Jaylen Brown, people, I saw something on ESPN a couple weeks ago where they were showing like Jaylen Brown's footwork and doing half hezzies, dream shakes all over the place. And it's like, I think that when we talk about, people not getting their just due, I think Hakeem Olajuwon is another one of those guys that doesn't get his just due in a Jordan 90s dominated era. So much so that he was tutoring guys in the offseason, and the Rockets got tired of him tutoring everybody, so they made him an employee of the Rockets, so that he can't do that anymore. But I think when you look at Jokic, man, hands down, is that dude. And for the big man position, it's a credit, because like I said about Steph Curry, it just became very, very guard dominated, and all those guards wanted to play like Steph. Now you see a level of balance in that regard. But if I had to pick the MVP candidate and they weren't named Jokic, it would definitely be Donovan Mitchell.
Yeah, you're one of the very few people I've heard say that. And it's a really good point, too, because you look at team success, you look at what he's been able to do, the load that he has to carry, to your point. They are very reliant on him, and you saw that when he got injured. I mean, the difference that team is with or without him. So it's a great point. But we talk about the landscape of the NBA. I think it's either 3 or 4 teams, like, defensively are the worst this year in like modern NBA era. Like, it's awful. Mm-hmm. Do you think, obviously, defense has gone down with the rule changes and it's more offensive heavy, threes, running gun, more scoring. But would you credit that poor defensive rating to a pandemic type season where it's a shortened season? Or do you think this is just really the trend, things are going to start going here on out?
I don't think the NBA plays much defense. So, in comparison to the college game. So, in answer to your question, I think I don't know if it's the pandemic. I think it has more to do with high scoring games at large and people not getting back on defense on the other side.
Right.
I think the pandemic was just and the bubble are just things that were the natural progression of where we were going. But I think as far as like defense at large, I don't think defense. I think a lot of guys play passing lanes and get defensive play of the year unless you're like you're Rudy Gobert and you're just blocking shots. And it's crazy because when I look at the defensive play of the year, I actually don't think Rudy Gobert is the defensive play of the year. And I know everybody wants to lobby for Ben Simmons to be defensive play of the year. I actually think Miles Turner is the defensive player of the year, but I don't think they're gonna give it to him because last I checked, the Pacers weren't in the top 8. So I think I think that those awards have become popularity contests, and I think that just defense is obsolete. I'm looking at the standings now. The Pacers are at the time of this recording in 9th place. So I think even when you look at the Wizards, and I think people give Russ a hard time. They were in the 10th spot at the time of this recording. Like, the Wizards do have a chance to, potentially make it to the playoffs as well. So, it's still a very long season. And the reason why I look at it like that is because, the Raptors, they're in 12th place, and, they lost some key pieces. I talked about Kawhi at the beginning of the interview. His impact was very Jordan-like. And then you get rid of Norman Powell, and then, Kyle Lowry was on the trading block and was this close to being a member of the Miami Heat. So, the Pistons have slid down mightily all season. The Celtics, January, they definitely were struggling, and, they're finding their way back. The Heat are in 7th place. So, it's a lot that goes into it, but it's a popularity contest. I think if the Pacers were at least a 3rd seed, Miles Turner would be getting more, considerations for Defensive Player of the Year. And I think he has been Defensive Player of the Year.
That's a really good pick, because I had the pleasure of watching him live covering the Magic, and I'm like, man, he moves his feet so well for a big. He knows how to switch out on guards. Obviously, a dominant presence in the paint, long arms, big hands. I wouldn't be mad with that pick at all. But to your point, it kind of is a popularity contest, team success. Another one that I think he won't get it this year, but I think he's going to get it soon is Bam Adebayo. I think his ability to really just guard 1 through 5 and make a difference is ridiculous. I think he's going to get it. But I don't know who I just had on recently. I want to say it's Pierre. We had on recently. Typically, bigs seem to be getting the Defensive Player of the Year awards. I think that's why a lot of people are lobbying for Ben Simmons, because I think the last guy that wasn't a big to win it was Kawhi, right? So I think more people kind of want to see more guards and wings, since it is such a more perimeter game now, to win Defensive Player of the Years. I don't know if that's going to become a thing or not, but I would say that's probably why a lot of people are lobbying for Ben, and plus they're, at the time of this recording, a 2 seed in the East.
Yeah, I think Bam is making hella strides, and I think, every day I feel like he's showing people who he is, and I think, dating back to the finals last year, All-Star appearances and hitting, game winners against the Brooklyn Nets, a top seeded team, a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, I like Bam, and I want to see him do well. I think he's another hybrid big. That is in the conversation for just who falls into that criteria that Ray Allen talked about as far as bigs making a comeback.
Yeah. My last thing for you here, Scoop, I know you're a busy guy, I appreciate your time, would be the Miami Heat. I'm trying to make sure I give them their flowers now, because last year I feel like we all kind of gravitated towards them in that story in the bubble and how they kind of just emerged as this dark horse. What are your thoughts on the Miami Heat now? Obviously, there's still time left in the regular season. We're going to have playoffs. What are your thoughts on this team compared to the team last year? And do you think they can have a similar type of run? Obviously not a bubble, but do you think they can still make an impact in the postseason?
Yeah, I spoke to a Nets member about a month ago, and they shared with me that they feel like Miami keeps them honest, but their biggest competitor in the East is are the Philadelphia 76ers. When I look at the Miami Heat, they, like the Pacers, dealt with a lot of trauma going into the season, specifically with Jimmy Butler being out for an extended amount of time, COVID protocol, in comparison to the Celtics and Jason Tatum dealing with COVID as well. The Sixers dealing with it in December, January. So I feel like they're making up for lost time now as their bunch is getting healthier. They're adding pieces to the team. They're looking to fill some roles by the time the deadline for their final rosters for the playoffs, take place. Names like Joe Johnson are definitely out there. The Bucks are the front runner currently for the Joe Johnson sweepstakes, but I'm told he wouldn't mind Miami, specifically because he knows that team well. But as you look at the Heat at large, Jimmy Butler is the key that starts the engine. But the 1-2 punch of Jimmy and Bam Adebayo, in my opinion, is a blue collar LeBron and Anthony Davis. When I look at what they did in the finals, they ran out of gas. They needed more help, and they didn't have it. And I think that the Miami Heat are a threat in the East, but I think, again, they're not Philadelphia, they're not Brooklyn, they're not Milwaukee, so they don't get the same look. But I think those are the top 4 teams in the NBA's Eastern Conference: the Miami Heat, the Brooklyn Nets, the Philadelphia 76ers, and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Right. I agree. Scoop, I always appreciate you coming on the show and giving me your time. I know you got a lot of things on your schedule and on your plate, so you always give me the time. I'm more than appreciative for it. So I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your time as well.